Squanto was a Patuxet man who played a crucial role as a translator and diplomat between Native Americans and the Pilgrims at Plymouth Colony. Today, we're going to be looking at Squanto, aka Tisquantum, who is often considered to be one of the most important Native Americans of the colonial period. Now, there's been some controversy over the years regarding whether or not Squanto actually did all the things that he is credited with doing. Like, teaching the Pilgrims how to plant corn and stuff like that. But regardless, he still played a huge role as an intermediary between the English colonists and the local Native American tribes, especially when it came to the famous first Thanksgiving. So, let's jump right into it. This particular raid happened near Cape Cod, and it was led by a guy named George Popham, who was trying to establish a settlement in the area. According to one account, after being recaptured, Tisquantum escaped again and made his way to Spain, where he spent 2 years learning their language before returning to New England in 1619. There were several other Patuxet men who were taken as well whenever Europeans made contact with Native Americans. Diseases from Europe would spread like wildfire through the Native American communities, killing millions. And one day, he met a bunch of starving pilgrims who had recently arrived in the area, and they were slowly dying. First, he taught them how to plant corn and catch fish, including a technique that the natives use where they would dig holes, put a fish in the hole, cover it up, and then use the leftover fish guts as fertilizer for the corn. He basically lived a life of service and unfortunately died believing that he was helping build a relationship between the English and the natives. But in reality, he was just helping lay the groundwork for the eventual displacement and genocide of Native Americans. Corn loves nitrogen, and fish are high in nitrogen, so it was a great way to fertilize crops. Because without his help, the Pilgrims might have died of starvation, and the whole Thanksgiving thing might not have happened. But that's just my opinion. Why don't you guys let me know what you think in the comments below? And Squanto also told the Pilgrims about a special place up north where there were tons of wild turkeys. And since the Pilgrims were dying of starvation, they figured, hey, why not? And they traveled to this place and hunted tons of turkeys. You see, the Pilgrims had landed in Plymouth in December of 1620 and immediately started building houses and stuff. But they forgot to do one very important thing. They forgot to plant crops. So, by the time April rolled around, they were running out of food and dying. And the reason that this happened is because Native Americans had no natural immunity to these diseases because they had been exposed to them before. So as soon as the diseases showed up, boom, millions of people died, and invited the local chiefs, including Chief Massasoit, to a feast at Plymouth. Squanto helped broker the peace treaty between the English and the Native Americans, and the English agreed to stop encroaching on Native American lands and to pay them for anything they took, as well as give them gifts of blankets, knives, beads, and trinkets. Squanto acted as an interpreter for the English for a while, helping them trade with the natives and stuff. But eventually, he fell out of favor with both the colonists and the native leaders because he was rumored to be manipulating both sides for his own benefit. And while they were in England, word got out that there was a new virus going around Europe that killed a ton of people. Now, this virus was most likely smallpox, which had already ravaged the native populations in the south. And when the Patuxet men heard this news, they were terrified. They begged the English to let them return home, saying that they didn't want to die. But the English said, "Hell no. You guys are gonna make us rich, so we ain't letting you go." And sure enough, when Tisquantum returned to Wampanoag, he found everyone dead. But according to another account, Tisquantum never left England, and he simply spent the whole time there as a slave. Now, no one really knows which story is true. Maybe he went to Spain. Maybe he stayed in England the whole time. The point is, though, that he ended up back in New England in 1619, only to find that the village where he grew up had been completely abandoned. But the English didn't really want to stay in the wilderness, so they started plundering nearby villages instead. And one of the people that they captured was Tisquantum. They took him off to England, and that was the end of that. That is, until 1614, when Tisquantum was able to escape his captivity and return to New England. But the second that he set foot back on the continent, he was recaptured by the English and taken back to England once again. Okay, so Squanto was born around the year 1585. We don't know the exact date, but it was somewhere around there. And he was born in what is now eastern Massachusetts, specifically in a place called Wampanoag, which was a village of the Patuxet tribe, which was a part of the larger Wampanoag Confederacy. Now, the Patuxet people had actually been living in the area for several thousand years, maybe even 10,000 years, and they were living in a fairly balanced, peaceful state with other tribes in the region, including the Wampanoag, the Nauset, and the Cape Cod. They were living a pretty good life, hunting, fishing, gathering. Then suddenly, in 1616, the English showed up and screwed everything up. Anyway, Squanto's dad was named Asho, and his mom was named Patak. And according to one source, his name, Squanto, was actually an English nickname given to him by his father because he looked like an English lord that he knew back in England. But yeah, his real name was Tisquantum. And his last name, if you can even call it that, was Nanopashamit, which means strong swimmer. And young Tisquantum got that name because he was literally one of the best swimmers in his village. Like he would go down to the shore and collect shellfish and catch fish and stuff and he was just really good at swimming. But yeah, that was Squanto growing up in this village of Wampanoag. He was a normal kid, probably went fishing with his pop, gathered food with his mom, hung out with his friends. No idea what kind of mischief he got into. But anyway, when he was about 20 years old, his life took a turn for the worst. In 1605, European explorers came back to the coast of Massachusetts, and this time they decided to bring some boats closer to shore and sneak onto land and raid the villages. See, when Tisquantum was first taken to England, he wasn't the only one. Now, this was actually a pretty common occurrence during this time period. Anyway, the village where Squanto grew up was now abandoned and destroyed. So he moved in with the chief of a nearby village named Massasoit. So Squanto, being the nice guy that he was, decided to help them. After the hunting trip, the Pilgrims wanted to negotiate peace with the local Native American tribes. So Squanto went ahead, and in 1622, Squanto went on a trip with some English explorers, and he died of fever not long after. Regardless, Squanto is considered a pivotal figure in the early history of New England.